Hey guys, how's it going? It's Danconia and welcome back to the Overwatch League Roundup 2020 Week 8 Atlantic Preview. So it's time for the second preview ahead of the Week 8 fixtures, and today we will be taking a look at the Atlantic Division. Some things to go through just before we go through the fixtures though. Next week we will see 20 games, and from then on in until the middle of the season we will see 20 matches per week. And this means that the Overwatch League has decided to go to showing matches on a Friday. This means that the Overwatch League roundups, the week previews, will be shifted back a day. So this week it was Thursday and Friday. Next week it will be Wednesday and Thursday that they will come out on, so that we don't miss any matches leading into the weekend, obviously, with those matches coming out on a Friday. And some of them are pretty early in the morning on a Friday as well, so I can't do them at 12 PM on a Friday, say, and then they'd be ready and out for the games that might start at 6 PM. It's a 9 AM game in China, so I have to get it out the day before, and that's what we will do. So it'll be a Wednesday and a Thursday for the week previews next week, and the meta preview will be on a Tuesday, and then I realise all of a sudden I'm running out of days to get content out on. I've got so much content that I want to do, and not enough days in the week to do it. But also, the championship skin for the San Francisco Shock is now available in the Overwatch League store in the Overwatch League game client. It is Doomfist, it's called Thunder Doomfist, and I don't know, it's not a brilliant skin in my opinion, and it's for a reason. It's a great skin in terms of a legendary skin, right? If I saw this during the Archives event or the anniversary event or something like that, I'd be like, wow, that's a really cool Doomfist skin, right? But in terms of a skin that's iconic for a championship winning Overwatch League team, I don't know. There's a few Easter eggs for the San Francisco Shock in there, but it doesn't scream San Francisco Shock like the London Spitfire one screamed London Spitfire for Winston, with his whole Spitfire get-up and the logo on there and all sorts. This one just doesn't scream that. It's like, wow, this will please people with the San Francisco Shock, but it'll also please people who have got no idea who the San Francisco Shock are. So I think it could have been better, especially as it's not even following the Shock's colour scheme. Basics, basically, is what I'm saying here. It's a good skin. It's just, I think, could have been better. But, moving on to the fixtures for this Week 8 in the Atlantic Division then. And we will start off with the Atlantic on March the 28th at 6 PM GMT with the Toronto Defiant taking on the Boston Uprising. Now, you could make an argument for these two teams being the worst teams in the league right now, with Boston Uprising basically the worst team in the league, and Toronto Defiant on a horrendous run of form at the end of our last bit of play, where they did lose to the Houston Outlaws, who were originally one of the worst teams in the league, but I don't know whether we can put them there now. So the Toronto Defiant, they really need to turn things around against the Boston Uprising. This is their opportunity to do that, and I would be expecting them to do so as well. I think Toronto, even on a bad day, should have enough to see off the Boston Uprising. The Boston Uprising are so disjointed, it barely looks like a team. So I would expect Toronto to get a win over the Boston Uprising. If they don't, Toronto are in some trouble. But moving on to 8 PM, and we have the Battle of Europe. It's the Paris Eternal taking on the London Spitfire. So, as we know, London Spitfire are now in Korea, and this presents some issues. There have been some people saying, well, maybe the London games will be called off. I don't think they will. I think we would have heard from that by now. So I'm not expecting it to be called off. But it does put the Spitfire at a disadvantage in some respects. Again, it depends whether some of these other teams have moved as well. The only two teams we know that have moved are Vancouver and London. So it could be that other teams have moved as well. Paris have a heavy Korean aspect to their squad, so maybe they have done the same thing. If they have, then it's going to be interesting. But Paris Eternal should have enough to see off the London Spitfire. They really, really should. The Paris Eternal have shown some really good quality week 5 and weeks before that. And London, they've got a bit of clutch to them. Don't get me wrong. We've seen them getting those map 5 wins. But I think Paris Eternal would be a step too far for them in this case, and I would expect the Paris Eternal to come out with a win, but I wouldn't be surprised if London Spitfire take a map. Again, it could all depend on what the issues are with ping and latency and stuff like that as well. But moving on to 10 PM, and we will see the New York Excelsior taking on the Atlanta Reign. This should be the best match of the week. Atlanta Reign, yes, they got surprised by Paris Eternal back along, but they did recover fairly well from that. New York Excelsior have looked pretty consistently good all through a season, apart from the loss to the Philadelphia Fusion, but again, the Fusion are a very good team right now. So, I would expect this to be very evenly matched. Now, if I was a betting man, I would go for New York. Just New York. I think this should be a long game. I think we will see quite a few maps, but I would still go for New York to get the win over the Atlanta Reign here. But I think it'll be really, really close, and the Atlanta Reign definitely have the quality to try and see out a win here. But moving on, and at midnight on Sunday, March the 29th, we will see the Florida Mayhem taking on the Washington Justice. So, this is a difficult one, because Florida, they've shown us some good looks, they've shown us some bad looks, but the Washington Justice have also done the same. So, they're two teams that are struggling for some consistency right now. I think the Washington Justice and the Florida Mayhem are definitely better than what we saw last season. That's all we can say about that. But it's a hard one to call, but I think the Washington Justice have that ability to be carried by their DPS line. And I think that's probably what we'll see the Washington Justice perhaps get a narrow win over the Florida Mayhem here. We have to remember that Florida Mayhem do have really good quality in their DPS as well. But Washington, Stratus and Corey, it's a very good DPS line, isn't it? And we're back to a meta that would favour them as well. So, yeah, I think I will go for the Washington Justice in this one. But moving on to the Sunday then, and at 7 PM, we will see New York Excelsior taking on the Boston Uprising. This should be the quickest match of the weekend, with New York Excelsior probably getting a fairly hefty victory over the Boston Uprising. Boston Uprising, if I was you, I'd be concentrating on that Toronto match, because I wouldn't be over investing resources into the New York Excelsior match. Let's take that as an L. Let's just make sure we get a win against a team that we know we have the quality to beat, and that's the Toronto Defiant. So, even a good Boston Uprising is going to struggle to beat New York Excelsior. So that's the way I'd look at it if I was the Uprising. But New York, they might take the Uprising for granted, considering they have Atlanta Reign earlier in the week. But again, even with Atlanta Reign earlier in the weekend, New York Excelsior on a bad day should beat the Boston Uprising right now, so I would expect Excelsior to come out with a pretty hefty win there. At 9 PM, we will see the Toronto Defiant taking on the London Spitfire. Now, I think this heavily depends on whether Toronto Defiant have sorted some of their problems that they've had in the previous few weeks of play. If they have, then this will be a really close game. And if London Spitfire are anything to go by, it'll be a close game. It'll be a 5-mapper because that's what London Spitfire are like. But I would expect London to come out on top. Again, that depends on latency issues. It depends on ping issues if there are some. So it's all a bit up in the air at the moment, and it'll be interesting to see how some of these players adjust to being online. Remember, having ping. Some of these players, and I've talked about this I think previously as well, like London Spitfire, they have got a team of players that have played a lot of online matches, right? There are a bunch of unknowns coming into the season. They played a lot of online matches, so they'd be more used to it. But New York Excelsior, their team, especially the core of it, basically has played on LAN for years and is not used to online tournaments. So that could be a benefit for certain teams like London Spitfire. Toronto Defiant, though, should be able to match the Spitfire in that respect. So I would go for a Spitfire win, but I think it will be quite a close one. And then lastly, at 11 PM, we will see the Florida Mayhem taking on the Atlanta Reign. This should be a win for the Atlanta Reign. It depends whether the Reign overinvest their time into the game against New York Excelsior. It is possible, and in that case, they could kind of take the Florida Mayhem for granted. I would hope they have learnt lessons, though, from that. And I would expect an Atlanta Reign win, because we are looking at Atlanta Reign being one of the better teams in this league. Florida Mayhem, they're looking at a play-in right now, not a playoff. So I would expect Atlanta Reign to get a win here, perhaps a 3-1 win or something like that. But that rounds us off for the fixtures ahead of the Atlantic games coming in this weekend. It should be an interesting one. It'll be interesting to see how these teams adapt to being online, because they have now been playing, you know, these are the teams that have been playing homestands week in, week out for the start of the year. So it will be interesting to see how they adapt. And I think some of them will adapt better than others. Some of them might have that bit of getting used to it, or getting back used to it because they used to be online. But I think all in all, it should be really interesting. It should be really interesting. We could play with close games like the Toronto-London game, New York versus Atlanta game, Toronto versus Boston possibly could be quite close. It's possible that Paris versus London could be close. It depends how well London play, in my opinion. So it's possible to see a lot of good games this week. But I will leave it here for this one. Obviously, I'll be back for the results next week. It will probably be Tuesday, because I believe some of these games are going to be on the Monday or run into the Monday. So I need the Monday to record the video, get it all edited and rendered, and then it will come out on the Tuesday. Over this weekend, we are going to cover transfers. We are going to cover contenders. So that should be some really interesting stuff to look at. And I've got an absolute megaton of Overwatch League to watch, and I'm not going to get much sleep because of the times it's on. Oh dear. I'm going to be Papega next week. Okay, but for now, thank you guys so much for this video. If you liked it, give it a like, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next video. See you then.